Have you ever wondered why there's no Calvin and Hobbes TV show? Why there are no mugs or pencil cases with Calvin and Hobbes plastered all over them? Why there are no kids clutching a Hobbes toy? That's because of the artistic integrity of Calvin and Hobbes. The idea that Calvin and Hobbes would take off wasn't really a notion that occurred to Bill Watterson, so that early on in his comic strips run, he signed away the licensing rights to the syndicate with little hesitation. Bill Watterson even said in the 10th anniversary book of Calvin and Hobbes, "I was more worried about the contractual consequences if the strip failed than the contractual consequences if the strip succeeded. It was not until later, when the pressure to commercialise focused my opinions on the matter, that I understood the trouble that I had gotten myself into." Bill Watterson found himself in a great predicament. He had no legal recourse to stop the syndicate from licensing his creation. So how did he fight off the greed of the syndicate and the ravenous demand of the public that were already buying bootleg Calvin and Hobbes merchandise? I'll get to that later. But first you need to understand Bill Watterson's philosophy on licensing, so you can appreciate why he fought so hard to protect Calvin and Hobbes from the perils of commercialism. His first problem with licensing was that it cheapens the original product. He says, when cartoon characters appear on countless products, the public inevitably grows bored and irritated with them, and the appeal and value of the original work is diminished. I have to agree with Bill Watterson here. There's something to be said about scarcity. When an original work becomes limited, it becomes infinitely more valuable and treasured amongst those who appreciate the original work. I mean, look at Star Wars. What was special about it has now been buried by an avalanche of unnecessary movies, endless TV shows, and merchandise. The second reason Bill Watterson detested licensing was that the commercial product born from it rarely captures the soul of the original work. The world of a comic strip ought to be a special place with its own logic and life. I don't want some animation studio giving Hobbes an actor's voice, and I don't want some greeting card company using Calvin to wish people a happy birthday. His third reason against licensing was less philosophical and more practical. I went into cartooning to draw cartoons, not to run a corporate empire. The amount of work needed for licensing to run smoothly is staggering. You can easily spend more time delegating and supervising than working on the original product itself. Bill Watterson took great pride in his autonomous creation. He was an artist. He wanted to do everything himself, all the drawing, all the writing, all the colouring, and all the painting for the illustrated collector's books. When a cartoonist licenses his characters, his voice is co-opted by the business concerns of toy makers, television producers, and advertisers. At that point, he goes on to say, the strip has no soul. With its integrity gone, it loses all deeper significance. With his position on licensing solidified, he went to war against his syndicate. Though the syndicate preferred to have Bill Watterson's cooperation, they could do without it. As Calvin and Hobbes grew more popular, its potential to make more money increased. There was millions of dollars to be made as the stakes got higher. Desperate, the syndicate offered Bill Watterson a limited licensing agreement, meaning the more noxious and offensive products would be ruled out, but he had to agree to everything else. The offer sickened Bill Watterson. He said, "The idea of bartering principles was offensive to me, and I refused to compromise." After 5 years of the comic strip's run, Bill Watterson was tired of the argument over licensing, and he was ready to quit. He knew full well that the strip could carry on without him and that the syndicate could just hire new writers. But thankfully, the syndicate backed off. I think it was because they knew that you can't replace Bill Watterson. Calvin and Hobbes isn't just some formula that you can easily reproduce, but it's an expression of one man's soul. The exploitation rights to the strip were returned to me, and I will not license Calvin and Hobbes. And he never has.